So, ladies and gentlemen, let us all have a big welcome to Keith Skues and Tom Mulder.
Goedemiddag, dames en heren. Zijn er ook dames? Ja, dus dames en heren. Het is wel grappig om met Keith te praten op het ogenblik, voor in een paar minuten. Ik ontmoette Keith voor het allereerst in 1968. Ik werkte toen nog bij een reclamebureau in Amsterdam. En ze vroegen of ik een pakje naar Londen wilde brengen. Dan had ik in Londen een correspondentievriendin. Het was Evelyn Austin. En die regelde dat Keith haar huis zou bezoeken, terwijl ik daar was. Dus dat was een enorme eer. Los daarvan vond ik Keith eigenlijk de beste, in ieder geval een van de beste op Radio Londen. Dus het is heel erg leuk om met Keith te praten. A, omdat ik hem al zo lang ken. En B, omdat ik hem zeer talentvol vond. En nog steeds. Do you understand what I said?
Not a word. It's all double Dutch to me.
Okay. I said some nasty things about you.
Yeah. No change there then. So, guten Tag allemaal.
Heel goed. Very good. Very good.
That is my entire Dutch. I'm afraid the Dutch dictionary I left in my case at the back. But good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good to be here again in Amsterdam. Many years ago, I think the last time I was here was not in Amsterdam, but Utrecht for the Radioday. Must have been maybe 15 years ago. So it is exact. You're making notes, Martin. Well done, thank you. So to Hans and to Rob and to Martin, just thank you very much for organising this day. I've seen so many faces that I've either known through the radio or met on previous occasions. It's really wonderful to be back in Amsterdam. Just pity about the weather. Well, mind you, it's clearing up now. Anyway, we're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about radio. I hate being interviewed. I mean, I'm a broadcaster.
I understand what you mean.
You're okay. You're in charge. In a radio station where you've got control of all the turntables and the microphones and everything else, the CD players, is fine when you're interviewing somebody. But then you reverse the role and suddenly you're being interviewed. I hate it. And I haven't a clue what we're going to have question-wise. But it's great to meet up again. We knew him as Klaus years ago, because there was that on Radio Veronica when you were working there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Klaus Vaak. And I have seen you on a number of occasions, and we have something in common, in as much as the theme tune that this has been an interesting discussion over many years, Mr. Tambourine Man, and maybe, I don't know if you're going to be asking me that question later, but how that came about and why I chose Mr. Tambourine Man. And there I was listening to was it Radio 10 Gold, I think it was, yes. We heard in England, and somebody said, they're playing your theme tune on Dutch radio, and I said, oh, no. So I tuned in, and I thought, what? And then you use it as your theme tune. So I was told...
The reason I used your theme tune is that I couldn't find something else.
Well, I was told I've got to take that as a compliment that you use that. Anyway, it's lovely to see you again, and thank you for the invitation. So, fire away with the questions. I can't promise I'll give you an answer, but try me out.
Okay. At first, it's a great honor to meet you and to talk to you. I have always been a very great fan of yours, especially on Radio London, of course. You came over the air as a very professional disc jockey at those days.
I'm not now, but I was in those days.
But
yeah?
Compared to...
Yeah.
When did the interest in radio begin?
Oh, a long time before that, when I was at Schuler School, when I was 11 years old, and I'd just gone to a grammar school in England, and I used to listen to the radio for popular music, but in England there was not that much popular music. You had to listen to Radio Luxembourg in the evening.
Was the same
Crackle.
in this country?
Yeah, in Holland, right. And then there was the American Forces Network, which is very, we've already heard about American radio. American Forces Network was very popular, and we could hear that in England as well. But there was no radio station for us youngsters at that particular time with the BBC. So I was interested in listening to shortwave, listening to the radio amateurs and all the rest of it. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I was interested from a technical point of view. I used to build radio sets, super het receivers and crystal sets and all those sort of things. And I thank really the master at my grammar school who taught me Latin. Now, I failed my GCE in Latin miserably. I didn't learn any words, amor, amas, amant, or something, I don't know what it was. But I did very well in radio because he was a radio amateur, and he had his own radio station, G3 AKX, if my memory serves me right. And he invited me to appear on his radio station, but with amateur radio, and there may be some amateur radio people here today, you weren't really allowed to play music and be a disc jockey, but you could talk to other people, and that's what they do, amateur radio. And that was my first appearance at the age of 11 or 12, talking to somebody in America. So that was my interest in radio, and I thought I'd like to take this up as a career, but technically not speaking. And so I was then called up, I don't know in Holland if you did not have conscription maybe, or perhaps you did, I don't know. But every male in England reaching the age of 18, if you were medically fit, we were called up for what we call national service. In America, I think they call it conscription. In Holland, I don't know what they call it.
Militaire dienst.
If you
service.
All right. Well, I got called up and wanted to go in the RAF to fly aeroplanes, didn't we all? Or maybe drive trains or trams. But I wanted to fly aeroplanes. So I asked to go in the RAF, but they said, well, it's very expensive to train you as a pilot. You've got to sign on for your lifetime, mainly, 7 years, 14 years or something. And I said, no, I wasn't willing to do that. But I'd heard a rumor that British Forces Network, the Englische Rundfunk in Köln, in Germany, British Forces Network in Cologne, in Germany, took on one person per year who was in the military, Navy, Army, Air Force, Marines, who would just do what we call in England a dog's body's job. That is the lowest possible job you can have in a radio station, which was going around. Everybody smoked those days, and they all smoked cigars, and you'd go and empty the ashtrays, and you'd just clean the floors. I mean, it was really the bottom job. But I got my foot on the bottom rung of the ladder. It took a long time to get to British Forces Network, and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And I was stationed in Germany in a place called Broxedel, which then was a secret underground radar station near Wilhelmshaven, Jever, which we didn't talk about because of the Cold War, but now everybody knows about it. So that was my initiation, if you like. So I started with British Forces Network in 1958, long time ago, 51 years ago, and I was trained just eventually as a producer, and becoming an announcer happened by accident. Working for British Forces Network or working with the military generally, the social life is very good. So you do your work during the daytime, and at night, a few, as we say, drinky poos.
One or two.
One or two, or three or four. And on one occasion, we were invited to the British ambassador in Bonn, and it was a real big party, and they invited the whole radio station along. I was producing the breakfast show for the following morning. The radio station used to operate from 6 o'clock in the morning till midnight or 1 o'clock, and then it closed down. And then they started again the next morning. So I was producing the breakfast show. It was a very good party, plenty to drink. We didn't have to drive those days. Somebody drove us everywhere. So I said, I've had too much, so I daren't go home because I'll fall asleep and never wake up. So I went straight to the radio station and awaited the arrival of the lady announcer, who never turned up. She was still flat out on her back somewhere, and I'll be careful what I say here, with drink. Nothing more, I promise you. And she never turned up. So it's the old adage or the old phrase, the show must go on. So I did the radio program and got sacked for doing it because I hadn't signed the necessary bits of paper, which you have to. I had to sign the Official Secrets Act. But the fact I appeared on radio without signing the agreement, and they hadn't passed me as a radio announcer, of course I got kicked off immediately, and that was the end of my broadcasting career.
When did you discover you had a good voice for radio?
Well, I haven't. Nobody's ever discussed that. Got a great face for radio, but the strange thing about talking about voices, when I went to BFN for the interview, and I was still in uniform in the Royal Air Force, they put me through what they call an audition. I don't know why they gave me a sheet of paper and said, read this. And it was in English. It was like a news bulletin when you were trying to read it from the paper. And you turn the paper over, and it was in German. Oh, meine Gott, was ist das? Ich spreche Deutsch. Ein Bier bitte? No. You failed the audition. Okay, fine. So I failed the audition, and they said that my voice was not posh enough for English listeners in the forces. Not posh enough. Now, 50 years later, I'll just finish the sentence. 50 years later, the BBC tell me, can't you make it a bit more common because you're too posh for us now? Crazy.
Because you noticed on Caroline the difference between you and the other disc jockeys. You had a better voice.
Not a better voice, a louder voice, maybe.
A better personality.
Nah. Well, I was lucky, you see, because I'd been trained in British Forces Radio, British Forces Broadcasting, before Caroline came along, before the Pirates came off the English shores, which is Easter time, 1964. I'd been broadcasting, therefore, for 5 years, in Germany initially, and then out into Kenya, East Africa, Aden, all the way around Cyprus, Malta, Gibraltar, Hong Kong, all these sort of places. So I could communicate, but pirate radio was just totally different. And the job on Caroline came along. I mean, I don't know if that's one of your questions, but how did you end up on Caroline when you were broadcasting for Forces Radio? I did the radio things for 5 years or so, and I wanted to be a disc jockey. I wanted to be a radio presenter playing records, and the job I had was going around reporting, when I was in Kenya, all about the wars, Tanganyika, Zanzibar, Uganda, everybody was warring with everybody, Kenya, everybody was warring with everybody. And this is not what I wanted to join for. Then I was sent to Aden, and then there was the war in the Radfan, and I thought, So I resigned from then and came back to Britain and met up with a colleague who I'd been to school with. I hadn't seen him for years. He'd also done his national service, and we met up for a pint in a pub called the Red Lion. We won't mention that by name, but it's Redlion near Chesterfield Gardens, just round the back of Radio Caroline and to the side of Radio London. And I went in there, and I can't remember what, it was a long time ago. I just went up to the bar and said, 2 pints of best bitter, please, and a packet of crisps, or 2 pints of lager and a packet of crisps, I don't know. And there was a guy sitting at the bar just round the corner, and he said, "Hey, g'day, sport." He was from Birmingham in England. "Do you want to go? You got to say that again with your voice." And I said, "Pardon?" I said, 2 pints of lager or 2 pints of bitter and a packet of crisps, please. "Have you ever thought of going in for radio? You've got a great radio voice." And I said, And I thought my colleague had set it up, but I didn't know who he was. So he gave me his business card, and his name was Alan Crawford. And I didn't know who Alan Crawford was. I didn't know anything about pirate radio, because it was just after Easter time, 1964, and I'd been in a war zone, so I hadn't heard about this pirate radio business which had started. So he said, "Come in for an audition tomorrow." And I said, "Well, audition for what?" He said, "To be a disc jockey. We got this radio station. It's called Radio Atlanta, another station called Radio Caroline." And I said, "Oh, I've never heard of them." So I went along for this audition, which was in Soho in London, which is a rather iffy area of London, and the card he gave me was a strip club where all these ladies take off their clothes and do things. And I thought, well, that's all right, that's a good start. But where's the radio station? And it was right at the top, on the top floor. Came in, they gave me a piece of paper and said, "Right, can you do this audition?" I said, "And now, live from... You've got the job." What job? Disc jockey on Radio Atlanta, but we are going to combine with Radio Caroline, and we just wait a few weeks, because we are going to call all the stations, the 2 stations, Radio Caroline. There'll be Radio Caroline South and Radio Caroline North. The Federica will be in the north, the Mi Amigo will be on the south ship. So I said, okay. But he didn't tell me anything about ships. He just said, "Ring me in 2 weeks' time, and then we'll discuss the job." So I rang him in 2 weeks' time. Yes, he said, fine. Other disc jockeys will also be going out. So you meet at Liverpool Street Station in London, and I said, and then you go by train to Harwich. Excuse me, I thought we were broadcasting from here in Soho in London. I was thinking that, this was the studio in London. We're broadcasting from a ship. Waarom? Why? What is the point of broadcasting? Then they explained all about the international laws, that you have to be outside the 3-mile limit, etc. So that was a bit of an eye-opener. Anyway, I did join, and joined about the same time as Tony Blackburn, I think just the week after Tony. So I think it's about August time, I think, something like that, in 1964, and spent all the remainder of 1964 there, the whole of 1965, and then I moved, jumped ship. Well, I came to Luxembourg to do a CBS show for a while. Then I went to Radio London, and the reason for doing that was, it was strange because we knew we were naughty boys and we were defying the government, but sooner or later we knew the British government would either put us all in jail or get rid of us. I mean, it was on the cards, because you can never win with the British government, who was ever in power, especially the Labour government. So I said, over a meal one evening when we were all sitting around the table, I think that somebody ought to chronicle what we're doing. I mean, we're only here maybe for a year, 2 years, who knows how long we will stay here, but a lot of people are listening to Radio Caroline, and then when Radio London came on the air, it was anything up to 20 million, which was, almost half the population of the British Isles. Somebody's got to take note of this. So they all said, yeah, what a great idea. So who's going to do it? Well, you've got a typewriter, Skuesy. You do it. So that became Pot Went the Pirates. Well, it wasn't called that initially. It was called A Life on the Medium Wave, I called the book. In 1968, that was due to be published.
So it originated already in the early 60s?
I wrote most of that, when I was actually on the ship with a Letter 22 typewriter. That's
so
when
it came out in 68 or so?
No, it was due to be published in 68. The publishers had it all lined up, and then my solicitor rang me and said, do you realise that if you publish this book, or if it is published, this book, you could go to prison for 3 months and be fined £1,000? And I said, why? So because you're writing about pirate radio, and you're not allowed to write about pirate radio. It is part of the Marine, etc. Broadcasting Offences Act. So I said, well, what do you think I ought to do? And he said, go to prison, you'll have a bestseller. And I said, well, let's leave it a few years, and I'm sure Lord Geoffrey Archer will probably do that idea. So I didn't go to prison, and I joined Radio 1. So I had to wait for 25 years to get the clearance from the government before I could publish it. And then they queried a chapter that I'd written about the government, the British government, coming in there and smashing up Radio Caroline and taking the equipment off the ship, etc. And they said, it's nothing to do with us, it's the Dutch government. I contacted your friends over here, and they said, no, nothing to do with us, it's you lot, British, who did it. So I'd put this in the book, and they asked me to take it out, to delete it, because it was controversial. And I said, well, I know it was the British, because I've got evidence, people who were on the ship I've spoken with, and we've got photographs to prove it. No, take it out. So I just toned it down just a bit. And then they asked me and they said, well, to replace that, I said, that means there's going to be about 2 pages blank, which I can't have 2 pages in a blank, blank pages in a book. Please put in your book people we have prosecuted for being pirate radio DJs. And that was all about the people who are up in top of flats playing, hooligan music and that's kind of music, that kind of pirate. I said, that's got nothing to do with it. This is watery wireless. This is broadcasting from ships. But they forced me to do it, and anyway, the book came out. So why have I done it again? You were saying earlier on that there's the second edition. It was sold out, the first edition, and I'm very interested to see a number of people who brought the first edition. That's worth something now. I will sign it later. I would have done nothing about it, but an agency rang me from Britain about a year ago and said, can you bring out a second edition? And I said, no, and there was no point. Pirate radio has not changed. It's as it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We've had reunions, we've had parties, we've had Dutch radio days, we've had lots of things, but no ships coming off the British coast. And they said, there's a big film coming out next year, and it's called The Boat That Rocked, produced by Richard Curtis. And I said, They said, yeah, it's a true story about, Caroline and London. So I said, oh, great. So they gave me a year to turn it around, so I brought the book up to date, which includes a Dutch Radio Day and various other things. So that's the only reason I brought the book out. You're supposed to be asking me questions.
Yes. I found this very
I'm not used to speaking.
Could you describe the job on Radio London? What did you do all day on the ship?
Sleep.
You did your show?
Yeah, on Radio London, well, that was different, totally different to the Radio Caroline setup. It was a larger ship, it was more organised, it was more professional.
Was it more comfortable?
Yeah. Caroline, you shared cabins with another fellow DJ, so you've got to know who your friends are. When a pair of smelly socks are hanging over the bed, you think, yes. We only had one very tatty shower there on Caroline, but London was much more organised. We had single cabins there as well, and it was a much more professional station. We did normally 3 hours on duty. Caroline, you tended to do 3 hours, and quite often you'd come back and do a second show. I used to do the morning show, 9 till 12, or sometimes an afternoon show, and then sometimes an evening show. But Radio London, you tended just to do the one show, so you had 3 hours on the radio. There was no preparation as we would do now. I mean, you just went in, there was a box of records, there were 40 records there, and it was called the Fab 40, and you just rotated them. They'd already been played in the program before, and the person who followed you was also going to play the same records.
Was the format very strict?
Yeah.
Were you controlled? Was somebody listening all the time?
Well, yes, but there was no communication as we have now with email and mobile phones and things. We could not contact the shore, only in an emergency. So by the time you were being told off for what you'd done by playing a record which you shouldn't have played, by that time you're back on land, and it's a fortnight ago, they've forgotten about it. But there was a chief DJ, and during my time it was initially, hello, Tony Windsor, and latterly Ed Stewart. So you more or less towed the line, but you were given freedom in a choice of, say, an LP track or a Revive 45, Sedate 78, Rocker from the Locker, Golden Oldie, call it what you will. But it was very strict, and it was very, very fast compared with Caroline, so it was a totally different presentation. And I enjoyed both styles. I had much more freedom on Caroline, in my day of Caroline. I know that changed later, but certainly during my time there, 64 to 65. I enjoyed that because it was not all pop music. You could play music from the shows and the films, and you had much more freedom. Radio London, very tight. And another attraction about Radio London, Big L, were the jingles. We'd never heard jingles, or I'd never heard jingles ever, only on American radio. And there they were, bang, 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 ever so professional, really good. So that made the station sound that much more professional as well. And the management of Radio London were very together as well. The managing director, a chap called Philip Birch, he'd been a sales manager in America, so he'd had experience of commercial radio, and he ran it as ex-military army officer, and it was a very disciplined organisation, so I enjoyed my time on Big Al Radio London.
What was the atmosphere like between the jocks and on the boat generally?
It's not like nowadays where everybody seems to be wanting to stab you in the back. Everybody got on with everybody. You had to do. I suppose it's a bit like public school in a way, or maybe in the military, where you're stuck with 10 other blokes, most of them English, Australian, American, Canadian, well, they all spoke English, and a bunch of guys who were Dutch, who basically formed the crew, the captain, and they were the engineers, technical engineers for the ship, and then we also had the chef, who was Dutch. And there was great camaraderie, because the Dutch, I've always said, even in my days in Germany, the Dutch are the most friendliest people in the world, I found. They welcome you so much, and I really fell in love with Holland when I was working 50-odd years ago. And on the ship, there was, periodically you'd have a little disagreement, because the English sat and had their tea at that time, and the Dutch had theirs at another time, and you only had one central messing area, unlike in the film The Boat That Rocked, where they had a big cafe and a bar and everything. We had none of that. But the Dutch, I found working with Captain Berniger, Bill Berniger, he'd been on Caroline originally, and then he moved across to Radio London, was a great captain, very, very, he was severe in a way if you did anything wrong. But we got on with him very well. He was sadly he's passed on. But just a sidetrack of that the bell, not the Caroline bell, but the bell off the MV Galaxy, which was a United States minesweeper, the USS Density in the Second World War, that bell when Radio London finished on the 14th of August 1967, the bell was taken off and presented to Captain Berniger, who had it apparently, allegedly, I've not seen it, I don't know, but he had it outside his house where he lived here in Holland, and that stayed there until he died a few years ago. And now his son has passed that bell on to a museum in the United States of America in Texas. I can't remember the name of it, the Admiral Moritz something or other museum. And because there are still a group of people who served on that ship, the USS Density as it was there in the Second World War, who are still alive. They're 80-odd years old now, and they meet and have an annual reunion, and of course it gets smaller and smaller and smaller every year as people pass away. But that bell has now gone to that museum, because Radio London had a sad ending, I'm afraid, in Kiel Harbour, which was a great pity, as did the Mi Amigo go, down, down, down to Davy Jones's locker.
This is perhaps a very impolite question, but how were the salaries on the pirates? Did you earn a lot of money?
Oh, yeah. You've heard of Jonathan Ross, have you? How much he earns with the BBC?
Not in those days.
Nothing like that at all. I know. I got 12, this is 1964, so it's a long time ago. I got £12 a week on working on Radio Caroline, £12 a week, which is, well, you got euros, haven't we, now here? So it's probably about 12 euros or a bit less than that, which was not a lot of money. But you worked for 2 weeks on the ship, and then you had a week's holiday. So when we came off the ship, you were paid 36 English pounds, and you could go and spend it as you wished. But also, balancing against that, you didn't have to pay for food, you didn't have to pay for accommodation or anything like that. So it was pocket money, or as I used to call it, beer tokens. And then you'd come on shore and you'd work, you'd be expected to report to Caroline House or Radio London, or I don't know about the other pirate ships because I wasn't on those. But you'd report to head office, hello, I'm back in town. Oh, we've got a job for you, Skuesy. All the other DJs are a bit more famous than you. They're always opening things, and we'd like you to close a petrol station, please, and or whatever you did. And of course, you got money for that, so you made quite a bit of money extra during your week's holiday. But we didn't get a lot. But it seemed to go much further than it does today, for some unknown reason. When I went to Radio London, I got £25. I started £25 a week then with Radio London, which was 2 years later. So that was it. The BBC didn't pay much more when I joined National Radio. Those days, but it was a long time ago.
Did the BBC pay more than the pirates?
Yeah. But,
a lot more or a bit more?
I got my very first show on the BBC was Saturday Club, which was a 2-hour radio programme on a Saturday morning, which I got £35 for. And that was a national programme that went all the way around the British Isles. It was also on the BBC World Service. It was also on the British Forces radio stations. But it didn't matter how many stations it went on. I was £35, that's what I was paid. Television was much more. But radio, I don't get much more than that now. 36, I think it is, where I work at the moment. I'm not on national radio anymore.
Could you still work in the same professional way when London closed down?
I don't understand the question.
When we listeners in Holland listened to London, we found it very professional. When you started working for the BBC, could you work in the same way?
Oh, I see what you mean. No, you didn't have the freedom of what you had on the pirate ships. We didn't have scripts or running orders or anything like that with the pirates. We just got on with it and played what we have to do. The BBC was a whole new ball game. To me, it opened my eyes because I was not playing gramophone records in that show called Saturday Club. when you did the opening announcement, you said, and in today's show, the Bee Gees, Brian Poole and the Tremolos, Cliff Richard, they were there in a big studio like we've got this room here, with an orchestra, and it was all live music.
You did it live?
Yeah. Well, sometimes live, sometimes pre-recorded. But they call it live music as against commercial gramophone records. So that was an eye-opener to me, to actually go and interview Cliff Richard and go and interview the Rolling Stones or whoever was on. The Bee Gees were on the very first show that I did. That was just amazing. But it was all split-second timing, and they had what they called a running order. The announcer will say, good morning, or good afternoon, or in my case, Jambo World, or any expression you use. And it was all scripted down there. And then you had to, because you were doing Cliff Richard, for argument's sake, I would have to prepare a series of 4 or 5 questions. And then I'd have to show those to the producer and say, I'm going to ask him, what is your real name, Harold Webb? Oh, sorry, what is your real name? Pause. Harold Webb? And they say, oh, no, you can't ask him that. And then they would change the script around, so you had to fit it. And it was all based on a stopwatch, the famous BBC stopwatch. There is a secretary sitting there saying, Okay, Skuesy, do your announcement. And now, ladies and gentlemen, live from London, blah, 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 blah. You took 13 seconds. You can only do it in 11. So you do it again, and you do it right in 11 seconds, I say. But you emphasise the wrong words. Television's even worse. So, yes, we were controlled, and you had to go in for a rehearsal. We'd go in there at 7 o'clock in the morning, bleary-eyed, to go on the air live at 10 o'clock in the morning, English time. So you had a full-scale rehearsal, and the producer was changing things all the way around. So it was a completely different format to what we were doing on the pirate stations. Having said that, after Radio 1 was established, probably 2 years later, they did away with scripts, but they still had what we call running orders. In the days of Radio Caroline, Radio London, and the other offshore stations, we never had to fill in loads of forms for the Performing Rights Society or the Mechanical Copyright Organisation. Every time we play a piece of music on the BBC, we've got to put all the details, who sang it, who wrote it, who published it, what the record label is, what the record number is, did it fade, how long it lasts, all this information for every record. So I do a 4-hour programme, BBC East, every week, as I will be doing tomorrow night, which takes me at least 4 hours just to do the paperwork at the end. The old days, of course, you had an accountant who did all that. But that is the bugbear of being a radio presenter, or I'm a producer as well, so I do both, as a lot of BBC people do. But you've got to do all that particular kind of work. Somebody said to me a few moments ago, they said, well, it's all different now, the BBC, it's all computerised, you don't have to do anything. And I said, that's correct to a certain extent. The music is all automatically logged when you press a button. Not in my case, because I'm still playing, I still call my programme Pirate Radio Skues. I shouldn't do, but that's what I'm still calling it. So I've got to log all these records, which are not on the mainstream computer because they're older records. They tend to be music from the 1960s. But for modern day presenters, all they do is just press buttons, basically. You're a mouse jockey instead of a disc jockey, really. You've got this.
Why is it that people still talk about the pirates after 40 years they're finished?
I wish I could answer that. I've never found anybody who can answer it. I would never have thought, honestly, truly, sitting there in 1964, 65, 66 or 67, that I'd be coming here 45 years later in Holland with a group of very nice people saying, well, the pirate radio days were very good. It was an excellent time. We played some very nice gramophone records, and it's all very good. I would never have believed that we would still be talking about it. But being realistic, pirate radio in England, and I guess in Holland to a certain extent, well, I'm sure in Holland, because Veronica is very popular, and I used to enjoy listening to Veronica. And the Dutch government were much kinder than the British government, because what we wanted to do, the way I became a pirate DJ, was to force the government of the day to try and introduce some form of local radio, commercial radio, hopefully. We had to wait a while. BBC local radio was set up in 1967. Leicester was the very first local radio station. But commercial radio, we had to wait till 1973 for LBC and then eventually Capital Radio. So we had to wait a long time. not all the pirate DJs got jobs with the BBC. In Holland, they brought certain people on land and said, "You're very welcome, have a radio station." So Veronica, Tros, various other stations, all hugely popular and great, but not in Britain. I didn't know. What was your question? I forgot what you asked me.
When did you join Haddam?
That wasn't the question you asked me.
No, but now it is.
Oh, my goodness me. If I had only had notes and my BBC script, I could answer that. 1974. My ambition was always, even from the pirate radio days, was to run my own radio station, commercial, hopefully. And I had to wait till 1974, which was just about a year after commercial radio arrived. And somebody, Yorkshire Television, approached me and said, "Would you like to help run or set up a radio station in Yorkshire?" Yorkshire, where's that? They're wild up there. They don't even speak English. And all they do is drink beer all day and fall over. Yeah, I'll be there. So I went up there, love. They all talk a bit like that, up there. See they? And I thought, I'm not going to be welcome in Yorkshire, with my voice, golly. So I employed a group of local people who'd never really made it in radio to promote the localness, and then I took a number of rebels from the BBC with me, including myself.
Roger Moffat.
To name but six. Roger Moffat, yes, my goodness me, there's a name. No longer with us, sadly. He's broadcasting on Heaven FM, I think he is up there now, alongside a lot of other DJs and radio presenters. Roger, you mentioned that name, Roger Moffat. He was a guy I really admired most, I think, as a young lad. When I was a young lad in short trousers, my father was working in Manchester on one occasion, and it was a school holiday, and I asked, could I go to Manchester? Because this program, which he introduced, which was called Make Way for Music, this is 1955, 1956 or something. So I went to the BBC and said, "Hello, I want to see Make Way for Music." And the chap said, "How old are you?" I said, whatever age I was, I can't remember, 14, 15. "No, go away, you can't come in here, you've got to be 16 to be allowed in here. Go away." So I then wrote to this chap, Roger Moffat, and I said, "I'd love to come and see Make Way for Music. It's a wonderful programme, and I think your humour is just fantastic. You just take the mickey out of absolutely everything. You've got a beautiful, refined voice." Anyway, he replied to me and said, "Well, we don't normally let people in to see the show because it's a live show which comes from Manchester on a Friday evening. No audience as such, but as you're keen, yes, okay, come along next week and ask for me." So I managed to get to Manchester the following week, very smart, school tie and everything, rolled up the same commissionaire as I'd seen the week before. "What do you want?" And I said, "I've come to see Make Way for Music." "Oh, we told you last week you're not allowed in here, until you're 16. I said, "I've got a letter here from Mr. Moffat." "Oh, all right. You got a young lad, Roger, you got a young lad in reception, he wants to come and see you." "How old are you?" 15. "All right. You've got to be good. There'll be a red light. You mustn't cough, speak, blow your nose when that red light is on because you will be on the radio otherwise." So I went and sat there, and for the whole of the show, that was fantastic. So I said to Roger, I'd love to do this job. It's better than working, isn't it? And he said, "Well, I do this." He said, "No, I've got to go and read the 8 o'clock news or something on BBC, whatever it was those days, I can't remember, BBC Light programme or something. And then you'd have to do a classical concert." So I was complete anorak and a pain in the backside to him because he told me afterwards, "I just got fed up with you writing to me every week." And I said to him, "How do I get into radio?" So he said, "Oh, go and join the British Forces Network in Germany or Cyprus or Hong Kong or anywhere." Is exactly what I did. And then umpteen years later, 30 years later, I'm working alongside of him when I come back to the BBC, and I said, "I took your advice, Roger." He got sacked from the BBC for reading it happened on my show, a late night programme called Night Ride or Late Night Extra or something, and we had to hand over because it was transmitted on medium wave, long wave, and FM, VHF. And I'd say, "It's now 12:30, and we join Roger Moffat or whoever it is for the shipping forecast." And then the long wave people would say, "Here's the shipping forecast." And it was pretty bad weather, a bit like what we've had here over the last couple of days. And Roger ended up by saying, and finally, Dover, Seoul, Fastnet and all the rest of it, force 28 and a half. It wasn't the fact that there's no such gale force as that. It was the half that did it. And the director general at the time, whose name I can't remember, was in a yacht in Poole Harbour in Dorset and went, "My God!" Roger was sacked, unfortunately. And he'd got a great sense of humour. They gave him a month's notice. You're sacked, but you've got a month's notice. And when he actually left, he went outside Broadcasting House, and I was coming in on duty on the day. So I saw it with my own eyes. He was standing there where they sell the local evening news or Evening Standard newspaper. He borrowed the bloke's flat hat, and the headline was "Roger Moffat sacked for real" or something was the headline there on the stand, and he was shouting out, "Read all about me, read all about me." Absolutely true. Moving on from there, I'm sorry, you just mentioned the word Roger Moffat, you were saying, or words or names, Roger Moffat. From there, he was sacked. I eventually then set up Radio Hallam. Are we all right for time? Okay, tell me when we've got to go. Get off! So I set up Radio Hallam and took Roger with me. And we spent more time in court than we did in the studio. He was always upsetting the locals or having arguments with somebody, and I'd have to go to court and bail him out. You know.
But on the radio, he sounded very posh.
Oh, he was. He's much pusher than me. He came allegedly from royalty, but we were never able to prove that. But a really, really good guy, but unfortunately that took hold, and that killed him. Unfortunately, drink killed him, which is a pity. Great talent. Anyway, that's by the by. That was about the Hallam thing, which was setting up commercial radio, which I loved. I was young enough to accept that job as program controller and a director of Radio Hallam. Loved it, absolutely, right the way through. But then another event took over, because I'd done national service in the forces. I was on the reserve for a number of years. Don't ask me why, but I was. And then I got called up when the Falklands War came up. So they activated me again. A bit like an old ship, they recommissioned me. And I had to go back to RAF Cranwell to do all the basic training again, swinging on ropes and how do you get across a river with 2 short planks and all these sort of things. And I was 40-odd years old at this stage of the game and working with students of 19 and 20. Come on, Grandad, get on with it, But you still had to do all the basic training. Anyway, by the time I got out to the Falklands, the war was over, so that was all right. But they got me the second time with the Gulf War. So I got called up for that, and I was public relations officer.
You went all the way
I was
to the Falklands?
Yeah, I was down there, yeah. Goose Green and all those places, yeah. Port Stanley, very cold. If you like lamb and sheep, they said, take a pair of green Wellingtons. I didn't know what that meant. And you had roast lamb every day for lunch, dinner, and breakfast the following day.
Was it dangerous to go there?
Yeah, people got killed. I didn't join the forces to get killed. No. And then the Gulf War, that came up much later, and then I got activated for that, and they got me right at the beginning. And so I went to Dhahran in Saudi Arabia, and I was what was called a public relations officer, which was a complete reversal in role. I wasn't allowed to broadcast. I was there in a uniform as a squadron leader, who was looking after you, all the media, as like this. There's a huge number, 250 journalists in a room, and you're trying to say, okay, chaps, this is what we're going to do. There's going to be a war. Saddam Hussein sending these Scud missiles, just missed you. Scud missiles are coming over, and you're ducking and weaving. And then you've got all this nuclear, biological, chemical warfare gear. It was just crazy. So my job was to give you, who works for television, what you want with the interviews with the right guy. It's television, therefore there's going to be an aeroplane in the background and a guy with his helmet on and his wings and all the rest of it. You're in radio, it doesn't matter where we do the interview, providing you can hear the sound of an aeroplane or it needs noise behind it. If you're a newspaper, you can do the interview anyway. So you've got to think these things through. And when you've got 250 wild people wanting to get off and do this and do that, it was a baptism of fire. I lost my job in radio because of that. I was out there 3 months, came back, and the radio station had been taken over. We were a public quoted company on the stock exchange, and we were taken over by Metro Radio, and of course they chopped from the top. So out I went, and all the others followed me. So that was the end of my career in commercial radio. I'd been there for 20 years, so, and had a wonderful time. But it was changing, commercial radio was changing, and sadly it's not gone the way I particularly wanted to see it go. It's not local radio anymore now, it's more or less national radio, where people just read from cards, liner cards, lack of personality. You hear the same program on every station as you drive around the country.
Is this still quality on the radio?
Quality? Well, national radio has quality, yeah. Local radio has quality in the speech output, which is very good generally. It appeals to the audience in that area. And I've always said to BBC management, you've got an inbuilt radio audience already, because the people who listen to local or regional radio tend to be over 40, tend to be over 50. And the BBC now are wanting younger listeners all the time, especially local radio. They're saying, we want younger listeners, because they're the listeners of tomorrow. They're not interested in 70 or 80-year-old people. They're going to fall off their perch. They want the listeners for tomorrow. So there's a change in that format. But local radio is very good, I think. The quality, it's very professional. And there's some good, I think there are one or two people here, including Ray Clark, who doesn't want his name mentioned, who's from BBC Essex. He did Pirate BBC Essex. He was on Caroline in his day. I mean, he does an excellent show on... He's not even here, is he? So you can't even hear me singing his praises. Pint of beer later, if you get the message, please, Ray. Yeah, go on.
This is the year that you celebrated your 70th birthday.
Am I?
Yes.
Oh, right, okay.
When you look back at your life, what is your general opinion?
I shouldn't have been here. I want to go back where I came from. I've been very lucky. I just achieved 50 years in radio, which is quite, I wouldn't say unique, but there are about 3 people who've done that on national radio in Britain. I think I'm the only one who's done it regionally or locally. So I've had a great career. I was in the right place at the right time. I worked jolly hard, but we all have to work jolly hard in our jobs these days. And I've done television, and I've done the voiceovers and all the other sorts of things. And of all the various strands of show business that I've done, and even, going on stage and performing in front of royalty, the Royal Variety shows and things like that, radio is still nearest and dearest to me. And my years on Caroline and London were just unbelievable. I think they are probably arguably the best years I had, because we were all young then, we were a bit rebellious, and you were giving the audience what they wanted, and by God, you knew it. When you came off the ship each week, you were mobbed, not because of my name or the fact you were a pirate DJ. That was it. It was wonderful. And to be talking about it, as I said, 45 years later, obviously means something. It's meant a heck of a lot to me. And my scrapbooks and photo albums at home are all full of the pirate radio stuff, rather than, say, my BBC career, which is, although it's longer than the pirate days, it's not the same. There's just something magic about the offshore radio days, as is proof today that all you good people who've come from about 31 different countries, I'm told, or areas, that's incredible. Where else would you get that sort of turnout?
Does this happen in England?
Well, you have reunions in England, yeah, but nothing like Hans and Rob and Martin have organised here. I mean, they put a lot of effort in, and they're very personal. They write to you as an individual. I was asked, would I like to come? And I said, providing I'm here. I mean, I was in America last week, and for 3 weeks before, and I said, I don't know if I can make it, but I will do my best. I want to come. I enjoyed it 15 years ago. That's a long gap to wait another 15 years to come, so I was really very keen to put in an appearance. Yes, we have our reunions in England, normally on the 14th of August. We have a party somewhere in a pub. It was a bit discerned. This last year, there was a get-together on the 14th of August, and it was going to be in the Red Lion, where I got my job on Radio Caroline, and the pub is closed down. It's right in the centre of Mayfair, where all the rich millionaires go to drink, and the place is closed. We're distraught. So there's normally a get-together on the 14th of August, and there's sometimes a get-together on Good Friday to mark Radio Caroline's anniversary. We've had lots of anniversaries. You've had the 40th, you've had the 45th. The next one will be the 50th. I don't know if any of us will be here for that. but we hope so. Whether Pirate BBC Essex will be allowed to broadcast for the 50th, I don't know. But that was a great idea that they pulled that together for 3 years. And a number of people I've seen here today, this morning, actually came over to Harwich and said, you know, I met you at Harwich, and wasn't it great? It was. I mean, it was just amazing, the turnout of the people who were there, and the response we got from the internet and everything else, the mail that we got, proves that that kind of radio is a must. But would anybody do it? Commercial radio are not in the slightest bit interested. It's ironic that the BBC had to do it rather than commercial radio, because had it not been for the pirates, commercial radio wouldn't be as it is today. But the BBC acknowledged it, and but it would be great to have a radio station just doing that kind of music. Other people will say, but the novelty would wear off, wouldn't it? You know, it wouldn't be the same, because in the 1960s we played the records of the day. The records of the day now are totally different kind of music. So would it have the same appeal? Would it have the same novelty?
I still think it would be possible to solve with laser.
Very much it did, yeah. Okay, well, when you set up a ship, just let me know.
And you need a few Americans for the atmosphere.
You think so?
Yes.
The boat that rocked is. I was in the States last week, and I saw the trailer on television, and I would have believed, seeing the trailer, that pirate radio existed in England thanks to the Americans, because it was the Americans who were the big DJs, and it's Hoffman, I think, who's the DJ in the film. I think he's probably playing Roscoe, Emperor Roscoe. I don't know if that's true or not. But having seen the trailer, I've not seen the film. They retitled it, they're calling it Pirate Radio. They've chopped it down in length as well. I was sad. I saw the rushes of the boat that rocked, which looked good. And then when I was a paying customer and went and saw the film, I was very disappointed with it, because they'd taken the story out. There's no story at all there. It was just an excuse to play some really great music, and the music is superb. But yes, okay, so we've got to get an American on board, or more than one.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
This is the end of our interview.
I know. As I said, I'm not used to speaking, so I'm sorry. I would have. Had you asked me any reasonable questions?
No, I would like to thank you very much.
Is this what you were going to ask me?
Yes, this is a copy. You can keep it.
We never discussed any of these.
No.
Well, seriously, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being such an attentive audience. It's wonderful to be here, as I said. I'm going to be around all day, and I think there's a dinner this evening. Hopefully we'll get along to that. And then I've got to whiz back to England. And tomorrow night I'll be on radio, so I'll be talking about the Dutch Radio Day on my programme, which is you can get it on the internet, www.bbc.co.uk/Norfolk. Listen again, listen live. That's the commercial. That's the commercial.
Thank you very much.
Just thank you very much indeed, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the way you received it.